the Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials. Today we're taking a close look at a real giant of cinema, The Sound of Music. 1965.
Yeah, and this film, it wasn't just popular, it completely dominated.
It really did.
It climbed up to become the highest grossing movie ever made at that point. Even beat Gone with the Wind.
Which is saying something.
Absolutely. And what makes its story, even more interesting is that this massive success happened even though some critics, especially the coastal ones, gave it pretty harsh reviews initially.
Yeah, there was a real disconnect there, wasn't there? Between the critics and the actual audiences who just loved it.
Totally.
It's fascinating how 20th Century Fox handled it. They were actually facing pretty serious financial problems back then.
Oh, right. So they couldn't just dump it everywhere.
No, exactly. They had to be careful. So they rolled it out gradually across the country.
A slower approach. Yeah. And that combined with this amazing buzz after the early screenings, especially out in the Midwest, apparently, it just let this wave of enthusiasm build up. Word of mouth was huge.
Right. And that's pretty much what we want to explore today. We want to unpack why. Why did this film hit such a deep nerve with American audiences back in the 60s? We'll be looking at how it sort of tapped into what parents hoped for, but also, maybe more importantly, the anxieties they were feeling.
Yeah, that's key.
All set against this backdrop of a family landscape that was changing really fast.
Definitely.
Now, we should probably mention the source material we're using. It does generalize a bit about, American culture and Hollywood to understand this huge success.
Yeah.
It's a broad look.
Sure, which is kind of necessary sometimes to see the big picture. And it brings up a really interesting point our source gets into. What even is a family movie?
Right, it's not just G-rated.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being okay for kids. It was intentionally marketed to and designed to entertain both kids and adults at the same time. And The Sound of Music is just a perfect example. It weaves in these more mature themes, things like nationalism, motherhood, romance.
Even the morality of war, subtly.
Right. All while still being totally appropriate for younger viewers. It really kind of built on the template that Mary Poppins had almost perfected just before it.
And you can't talk about it without talking about Julie Andrews.
Oh, absolutely central.
Even critics who didn't love the movie, they almost all praised her performance. She had this incredibly powerful on-screen persona.
Yeah, this image, right, of being nurturing, comforting. There was a wholesome goodness there that just clicked with people.
They even called her Joyous Julie. That whole image, it definitely played a massive part in why the film works so well.
So if we look at how the film actually starts, we see a storytelling setup that feels, pretty familiar.
Yeah.
This idea of a nanny figure arriving in a family that's, not doing so great.
Yep.
Dysfunctional, maybe.
Right.
And it's quite insightful, actually, to compare the opening scenes, Mary Poppins versus The Sound of Music.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. So Mary Poppins, we're thrown right into the Banks house, and it's just chaos.
Total chaos.
You've got the mother off, fighting for women's votes. The father's emotionally checked out, focused on work.
Very buttoned up.
And their nanny, Katie Nana, she's just had it. She's leaving.
Yep. Packing her bags.
And then, poof, Mary Poppins arrives.
Yeah.
This figure of order swooping into the mess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that with The Sound of Music, the Von Trapp house. It's presented so differently. Starkly, almost.
How so?
Well, it's almost militaristic. It's cold. There's no warmth, not since the mother died.
Right.
Captain Von Trapp rules with this really strict, rigid hand. The kids have uniforms. They answer to whistles.
Whistles, wow.
Yeah, it's regimented. And Maria's arrival is immediately disruptive, like from the get-go.
How did she disrupt it?
Well, for one, she refuses to use the whistle on the children. That's a direct challenge to his whole system right there.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting, isn't it? Poppins is London, Sound of Music is Austria.
Totally different settings.
But these stories about families, about parents, about maybe fixing things when they're broken, they clearly hit home with American audiences. Why do you think that connection was so strong?
Well, if you think about the context, the 1960s in America, things were really starting to shift.
Socially.
Yeah, socially, within the family, those traditional ideas, the father as the absolute authority, that was softening.
Becoming less rigid.
Less rigid, power balances in families were changing, divorce rates were going up.
And women's roles were less clear-cut. Right. In society and marriage.
Exactly. It was all kind of in flux. And these films, in their own ways, seem to tap into some of those underlying well, anxieties maybe, but they also offered this hopeful vision, connection, harmony in the family.
Like a comforting fantasy.
Kind of, yeah, especially with youth culture rising, questioning authority. Parents might have felt like they were losing control, not understanding their kids.
Ah, I see.
So The Sound of Music, with Maria as this loving but firm figure, restoring order and, fun, it offered comfort.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of those changing roles for women, let's think about Maria compared to, say, Mrs. Banks in Mary Poppins.
Right.
Our source material suggests Mrs. Banks ending up back in a more traditional domestic role. Maybe that didn't resonate quite as strongly as Maria's character did then.
That's a really interesting point, because Maruda seemed to represent something different, a different possibility for the women watching.
In what way?
Well, her relationship with Captain Von Trapp, it feels more equal, like a partnership. Her opinions matter, they're respected.
Yeah, she definitely speaks her mind.
And she doesn't lose her independence, her sense of self, just because she becomes a mother figure. It wasn't just back to the kitchen.
No, it felt more modern somehow, more empowered within that family structure.
Exactly. She wasn't just subsumed by the role.
Absolutely. And of course, a huge part of the story is the captain's own journey, his transformation.
Oh, definitely. He starts out so rigid, stern, almost cold.
A widower who seems like he's forgotten how to show affection.
Right.
Because of his grief.
Yeah, you see it so clearly early on. The uniforms, the whistles, just no warmth with the kids.
But then Maria arrives.
And even though he resists at first, she just gradually brings fun and music back into their lives.
You think about scenes like My Favorite Things or Do Reme.
Or even his initial anger when he catches them climbing trees. It shows how closed off he was.
And then there's that huge turning point, that pivotal moment after he's basically fired her, told her to leave.
Yes. He overhears the children singing for the Baroness.
Right, against his orders.
And he comes in, you expect him to be furious, but instead, he just joins in. He starts singing with them.
It's such a powerful shift.
It really is. It's the moment he stops being just the detached authority figure and starts becoming a father again, showing love, offering reassurance.
And the transformation keeps going, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. You see it at the party, the formal one, the music, the dancing. It shows more of his old self coming back, and obviously his feelings for Maria are growing too.
And it all leads up to that final decision he makes. He goes from this very strict naval captain
to what our source calls an idealistic modern father.
Yeah. Someone who puts his family, his morals, ahead of even patriotic duty, planning the escape from the Nazis.
Especially after singing Edelweiss so emotionally, that song becomes so much about his love for his country and his resistance.
Such a journey for his character.
And looping back to Julie Andrews, while the critics might have nitpicked the film, they were pretty much all on board with her.
Right. Universal praise for her.
Her on-screen persona was just, it was something special. It really connected. It's like, when an actor creates a character that feels bigger than just one movie.
Yeah, it becomes part of their whole public image, which you expect from them.
Exactly. And hers was this blend. Purity, caring, but also firmness, devotion, independence.
The ideal, right. The source says she was seen as the girl every mother wanted their daughter to be like.
Pretty much. But what's interesting is how this really wholesome image still managed to have a broader appeal. Well, compare her role in Mary Poppins, which felt almost entirely non-sexual.
Right. Practically perfect in every way, but not romantic.
Exactly. But Maria, even though she's a novice nun, there's definitely an underlying romantic quality. She's attractive. That appealed to the adults watching.
Okay. So not just wholesome.
Not just wholesome. And the media at the time apparently really ran with that. They sort of amplified that hint of sexuality.
So Andrews managed to be both pure and sexy in a way.
Yeah, caring but firm, devoted but independent. It made her incredibly appealing across the board. Men, women.
Wow.
She became a huge star.
A true idol.
And it probably didn't hurt that her own life seemed to fit the image. Her happy marriage, her views on motherhood. Apparently she called it heaven and handled her own kid with the confidence of Dr. Spock.
Wow. Dr. Spock, that was the parenting guide back then.
Absolutely. So that likely to strengthen that connection, that feeling that her on-screen warmth was genuine.
So beyond the performances, the story, the music, our source also points to the director, Robert Wise. His subtle but really effective filmmaking.
Yeah, he wasn't necessarily flashy, but he knew how to tell a story visually.
Yes.
He elevated it beyond just being a musical.
It's interesting, too, thinking about the opening compared to his other big musical, West Side Story.
Oh, yeah. Very different films, but both deal with outsiders disrupting things, right?
True. But the openings are visually distinct. West Side Story has an incredible aerial sequence zooming right down into the gritty streets, the tension of New York City.
Yeah, it's all energy conflict right from frame one.
But the sound of music.
Yeah.
It's almost the opposite, isn't it?
It really is. You get those huge sweeping shots of the Austrian Alps. At first, they feel almost imposing, a bit majestic, but maybe even a little intimidating with the snow. But then the camera moves, the landscape gets greener, more welcoming. And just like he zoomed in on the jets, here he finds Maria singing, frolicking in the hills.
It sets a totally different tone. Peace, nature.
Exactly. Establishes her connection to that world right away.
And Wise also used this recurring visual thing.
Yeah.
The motif of gates. Our source points this out.
Oh, yeah. The gates are everywhere once you start looking.
Like visual metaphors, right?
Yeah.
Showing the characters' emotional states, where they are in the story.
Totally. Think about it. Maria leaving the convent, framed by those gates. Her spirit feels a bit trapped, maybe.
Okay.
Then she gets to the Von Trapp estate. Seen through another set of gates. The house itself is like a prison under the captain's rules.
Ah, I see that. And then later.
Later, during Dobermai, those same gates are thrown wide open. It's pure visual freedom, joy, Maria's influence.
Nice.
But then when the Nazis show up, the gates are locked. They're literally trapped again.
Wow.
Even at the wedding. In the chapel, the nuns watch from behind gates as Maria walks down the aisle. She's leaving that old life, that enclosure.
That's quite layered.
And then at the end, in the convent, hiding from the Nazis, the locked gates keep the family safe, but Wise's camera moves back and forth, visually imprisoning both sides.
Suggesting the Nazis are trapped, too, in their ideology.
Kind of, yeah. It's subtle but powerful. He's showing us inner states and plot points using the set dressing, basically, without needing dialogue.
And clever filmmaking. And the hallway inside the mansion, too. That becomes important visually.
Absolutely. Wise uses these really wide shots in that hallway to say so much.
Like when Maria first arrives.
Exactly. She looks tiny, alone in this huge, grand space. You immediately feel her intimidation, how out of place she is.
And then later.
Later, it's filled with life. The so long farewell scene, music, kids everywhere. She's clearly in charge now, part of the family. That same space feels totally different.
And when she leaves, briefly.
Right. After the Baroness talks to her, she's alone again in that big hallway saying goodbye. The space emphasizes her isolation then.
Wow. And then there's that scene with Edelweiss, the song. It's quieter, but the direction.
Yeah, the way Wise focuses on their eyes, the subtle acting. It tells you everything about the shifting feelings between Maria, the captain, the kids, even the Baroness. You see the whole dynamic change just in their looks.
It's really masterful, subtle stuff.
Definitely. Now, making a movie like this scale, back in the 60s, it was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, our source touches on the production challenges, the whole studio system context.
It took a full year to film it.
A year?
Yeah, and that included a ton of rehearsal time, especially getting the kids ready for all that location shooting in Austria.
I bet filming on location wasn't easy back then.
No, all sorts of problems. Unpredictable weather, logistical nightmares. Apparently just having enough bathrooms for the crew on location was a struggle.
The glamour of filmmaking.
Exactly. And even with all that location work, they still built huge, detailed sets back in Hollywood.
Like a Von Trapp staircase.
Yep, the staircase, the ballroom, meticulous recreations, real studio craftsmanship.
Which kind of leads into thinking about editing back then in the classical Hollywood era.
Right. Editing was really collaborative then, tied very closely to the script and how things were shot with editing in mind.
So the editor wasn't just cutting footage randomly.
No. They were seen as crucial, like parceling out images according to the script, as the source puts it, piecing the narrative together visually based on the blueprint.
And sound changed things, too, right? Made editors more powerful.
In some ways, yeah. The arrival of sound cinema really shifted things, gave editors a lot of influence in the final product. But the main goal, aesthetically, was always continuity editing. Meaning the editing should be invisible, you shouldn't notice the cuts, it should all flow smoothly to keep you immersed in the story, in the reality of it, without drawing attention to the filmmaking itself.
Keep the magic alive.
Pretty much. Avoid flashy tricks just for the sake of it. So things like dissolves or fades were used a lot between scenes.
Instead of just hard cuts.
Yeah, they acted like punctuation, smoothly signaling a change in time or place, helping the audience follow along without feeling jolted.
And within a scene.
Within a scene, the goal was to make it feel like continuous time, coherent space. even if it wasn't perfectly matched action-wise. They'd prioritize things like eyeline matches or using sound to bridge cuts, always focusing on the characters and the story's logic over absolute literalism.
That's interesting. What about montages? They feel a bit different.
Yeah, montages were sort of the exception where editors could get more creative. They were used to compress time efficiently, show someone training or a journey.
Inject big events cheaply.
Exactly. Or things like a stock market crash, like in the Roaring '20s. Montages allowed for more stylistic stuff. Quick cuts, graphic matches, symbolism, a bit more freedom there.
Okay, that makes sense in context. Now, we should probably acknowledge the movie isn't exactly a documentary, is it?
Huh. No, definitely not. It takes quite a few liberties with the actual story of the real Trapp family singers. Big ones, sometimes.
But the core message, the thing that
Yeah.
really seems to resonate, it's there, right? Especially in that song, Climb Every Mountain.
Absolutely. That central idea about the importance of following your conscience, your beliefs, even if it's the hard path, even if it's unpopular, that's how you find real happiness.
Like Captain Von Trapp refusing to go along with the Nazis.
Exactly. That choice defines his transformation and the film's ultimate message.
So when we try to sum it all up,
Hmm.
why was The Sound of Music such a phenomenon? It seems like a perfect storm.
It really does. It tapped into family values, but also those anxieties about family life during a time of huge social change.
Then you had Julie Andrews, just captivating, in a role that perfectly matched her persona.
Absolutely. Plus, Robert Wise's direction, skillful, subtle, effective.
And the music. Can't forget the music. So memorable, so emotional.
It all just came together perfectly at that moment in time.
Which brings us to our final thought for everyone listening. Thinking about those enduring themes, family, conscience, escaping oppression, what parts of The Sound of Music's appeal do you think still hit hardest today? For audiences trying to figure out our own complex times in the 21st century.
That's a good question to ponder. What still resonates now?
Definitely something to think about. You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.